As always, donate to Jumpstart. Jumpstart helps economically disadvantaged kids play team sports, which is something that's near and dear to Rachel and I's hearts. So if you go to the links in this description below, pretty much all the information that you will need to donate is there. So we really encourage you, if you can, to do so. Again, it's a great cause. We love Jumpstart. They are our charity of choice. If you can, please donate.
Welcome back to a special edition of Puck Social, where we are covering the Hockey Canada trial. This is your weekly update with a heavy trigger warning for the week of May 20th to 23rd, 2025. The reason it's only 4 days this week is because Monday was a federal Canadian holiday and court did not sit that day. We have a lot to get to, though. So after EM finished testifying and there were issues last week, it's now a judge-only trial. And as you remember from the last episode, judge-only trials, she does not have to decide right away like a jury would. They don't sit there and pore over evidence and give their verdict immediately. The judge has the opportunity to review all the evidence, and she will go through all of the motions, all of the evidence, all of the objections, all of those things all through the transcripts, and make her decision and let them know, and they'll be summoned to court, and at which point they'll be either found guilty or they'll be acquitted. It's important to remember also that acquitted does not mean innocent. So in Canada, when you are charged with a crime, you have to be guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Whereas in a civil case where this is already sort of played out, it's only 50-50 basically. And in Canada, to even be charged with a crime, there has to be reasonable evidence for you to even be charged. So the way it's always been explained to me by criminal lawyers is if you're charged, there's a greater than 50% chance that you did this. It's just a matter of whether or not it can be proven 100% certainty that you did it. That's where the sliding scale lies. So if there's a 95% chance that you did it, you're going to get acquitted. But that doesn't mean that you're innocent. Doesn't mean you didn't do it. It just means they can't 100% prove it. And I think that's a very important distinction that needs to be made, because there's a lot of people making arguments for the players that they're innocent. That is not the case here. Acquitted is different than innocent. They have not been exonerated. They have not been, DNA has not proven that none of them were in the room. And because there were so many of them in the room, there are accounts that they were all there. And so at a minimum, given some of the testimony, some of the behavior was certainly unacceptable. And so innocent is most certainly not the word that anybody should be looking for here. Two players that were in the room but not charged, Tyler Steenbergen and Brett Howden, have testified. Steenbergen's testimony, there wasn't a ton in it. It was just that he was there, who was there, and the fact that he had spoken to Cal Foote after the fact. He couldn't confirm that he saw Cal Foote do the splits over EM, but he said that Cal Foote was standing, and then all of a sudden he was on the ground with EM. So kind of one of those things where you could leave a little bit of doubt there. Then we get to Brett Howden, and this is where things get very interesting. Brett Howden plays for the Vegas Golden Knights. He was the roommate of Taylor Radish, who testified earlier in the trial. And before this criminal investigation started, there was a Hockey Canada investigation. And because that wasn't a criminal investigation, everyone who was on the team was told, you have to participate. There's no option here. You were on the team, you have to participate, or you risk not being able to play for Hockey Canada ever again. And kind of basically being shunned from the organization, which, in fairness, none of the guys that were in this room should ever be able to play for Hockey Canada again, and I don't think they will. So that's kind of where we're at. But Brett Howden's testimony, so the Crown asked him about text messages that he had sent, and the text messages were to the effect regarding Dylan Dubé, and he texted Taylor Radish saying that he was so happy he left when he did because Dylan Dubé was, quote, smacking the girls behind so hard it looked like it hurt so bad. He texted that in the hours after all of this occurred and the days after this occurred. But when he was asked about it on the stand, he was unable to recollect details. And the Crown was hoping that he would be able to recollect these details. And not only that, he showed up horribly unprofessional for court. This is a man who plays professional hockey for a living and shows up in a suit 82 games a year and has to abide by various dress codes and various travel codes. And yet, when you're testifying in a criminal courtroom, he showed up in a hoodie and his hair looked like an unmade bed. So you can tell with the degree of seriousness he was not taking this with. The next day, he showed up in a golf shirt, so somebody told him to get it together. But he continued to say he doesn't remember saying this, or he doesn't remember saying that, and he doesn't remember all the details that he had previously given investigators. And that's a pretty convenient thing to forget. And so the Crown challenged. They wanted the right to cross-examine their own witness. And they submitted to the judge that Brett Howden was feigning memory. And it seemed like a lot of other people thought he was borderline perjuring himself. That's a pretty big accusation to make. You never want to say that. But feigning memory is also something that reflects very poorly. And it's something that you could get in trouble for. The Crown alleged that he was feigning memory on 18 occasions. The judge ruled he feigned memory on 4. And what is very important here is the actual text messages. The reason he's being asked to recall them is because they were ruled pre-trial inadmissible in court because they were obtained through the Hockey Canada investigation, which is where a judge said because they were forced by Hockey Canada to give those statements that they're inadmissible. And while we might not like that rule, that is the correct rule. If you're being coerced into giving a statement, forced into giving a statement, that can be ruled inadmissible. And so that's where we stand. The judge had to decide what was and wasn't going to be allowed. There's certainly the Crown is not thrilled with Brett Howden's testimony and the legal arguments that have followed because of his inability to seemingly remember anything. And so we continue with that, but basically Taylor Radish testified earlier in the trial, and he was Brett Howden's roommate. They were both in the room at one point or another, and the text messages have been ruled hearsay, which is an out-of-court statement that's inadmissible over concerns of reliability and accuracy. So basically, because of the way that this statement and these text messages were obtained, they're inadmissible, which obviously hurts the Crown's case, because anybody who reads those text messages knows that that's pretty bulletproof evidence. And so it's important that the Crown works to kind of corroborate some of the things that the victim was saying, in a way that they could do that was through these text messages. So it's very difficult to see sort of Brett Howden go, oh, nope, I don't remember various things, including describing being uncomfortable when Dylan Dubé was allegedly slapping the victim. And so they were basically, his memory issues prompted a wave of like evidentiary applications to try and get various text messages in, or various re-examinations to be able to talk to him about this. And they actually asked the CBC, who's been following the trial, asked a memory scientist about this. And he said that he often finds what is expected of witnesses or of alleged victims, and what is demanded by their memories is not what their memories can actually produce. So sometimes it's more difficult for witnesses and specifically victims to remember sort of the details. And memories can also change, but forgetting a central moment in an event is pretty unlikely, according to this memory scientist. It's not uncommon for witnesses testifying to experience memory issues, especially if there's alcohol and trauma involved, which we covered in our first episode. There was certainly alcohol involved for Brett Howden, certainly alcohol and trauma for the victim. Now, obviously, there's been a number of years that have passed, which certainly doesn't help the issue. And the judge has ruled that the text messages are not admissible. So that's a tough hurdle for the Crown to sort of get over. And she gave all her reasons to the lawyers, and it's not going to be admissible, and so the Crown is going to have to attack this a different way, perhaps by calling other witnesses to discuss what happened in the room. Now, the narrative that he's feigning memory to protect his buddies is an interesting one. So the defense tried to make the argument of why would he protect people that he barely knows, doesn't play with, and make that argument. That is categorically, as somebody who has worked in the National Hockey League, and quite frankly, I worked with the same team as Michael McLeod played for. That is nonsense. Anytime you play with a team, specifically a team where you win a Stanley Cup, a championship of any kind, you're considered brothers forever. There are group chats, there are get-togethers, guys are in others' wedding parties. You are tight-knit and close. There is every reason to want to protect them. So this notion that the defense lawyers are making, that they're not brothers, they're just acquaintances through the hockey world, that's not what hockey is. We have seen hockey come together over Johnny Gaudreau. We've seen it come together over the Humboldt Broncos. We've seen hockey come together. It's such a small world. Everyone is connected in some way, shape, or form. And these guys won together. So the notion that they're just acquaintances in passing is absolutely nonsensical. And nobody is buying that. If they want to say that in the courtroom, that's great. Nobody outside of the courtroom who knows anything about hockey is buying that for a single second. And I find it difficult to believe that a judge would believe that either. Brett Howden has to know better. You can't show up wearing a hoodie and looking like an unmade bed into a courtroom. You can't take a hockey game more seriously than a criminal trial, and it speaks to these boys' view of this trial and the seriousness they're taking it with, that is how they're showing up, and this is how they're conducting themselves. So it remains to be seen what the Crown is going to do heading into this week after the ruling that the text messages would be inadmissible. They still have a lot of case to make. There's, I believe, 3 more players that were in the room at one point or another that have not testified yet. So we will wait and see what strategy they proceed with. But until then, all of the support to EM and her long-awaited wait for justice. We will be back next week with another update.